Hello, friends. Welcome to Life and More Plus. Today, we are diving deep into a very special book, which includes history, poetry, devotion, all of that. And it talks about voices that challenged power through songs. My guest today is Mr. Raghavan Srinivasan, the author of Rebellion in Verse. It's a compelling exploration of Tamil Bhakti movement. The book talks about bhakti not just as inward spirituality, but something far more radical, a form of social resistance that questioned hierarchy, caste, ritual, authority, and even the language in which the divine could be addressed. Through the lives and verses of Tamil poet saints, Srinivasan shows us how devotion, written and sung in Tamil, became a force that reshaped religion and society, one that still echoes across India today. In our conversation today, we'll talk about poetry as rebellion, language as power, and tension between devotion and institution, and why these century old verses still matter. Welcome, Mr. Srinivasan.
Thank you so much, Rajkumari. It is my pleasure to join you in this podcast.
Mm.
And
So,
I
pleasure is all
really
ours. You've written a remarkable book.
thank you so much, and I look forward to
So,
your
why
questions.
did you want to write this book? What was the inspiration? What was the thought behind this particular book?
Yeah, see, I'm from Tamil Nadu, and I grew up
Mm.
in Chennai, and
Yeah.
you know, uh, I don't know about. I can talk the same about Bengalis, perhaps. Tamilians are very attached to poetry, and right
Okay.
from a very young age, you know, in as soon as you start um learning the language in school, you are introduced to
Mhm.
poetry, and it
Mm.
stays right through your lifetime. And a lot of works in Tamil, a huge corpus, exists as poetry. So
Mm.
if you look at the entire Tamil literature, I would say that half of it
Mm.
is poetry and the other half is narratives or stories.
Okay.
So
Okay.
right from Sangam times, Sangam poetry is everyone would have heard about Sangam poetry. A little less about Bhakti poetry because Bhakti poetry is sort of uh, confined to that area of devotion, and
Mm.
also they would have heard about the Tamil epics like
Mm.
Silappadigaram. They would have heard about the Tirukkural, which is a didactic, ethical verses. So all this are taught in school, and you know there are thousands, or perhaps lakhs, in Tamil Nadu who can recite these verses by rote. So
Okay.
they remember the verses, they remember every day. In ordinary conversation, you find that there is a lot of these
Okay.
verses being quoted, and movies are taken around this incidents of Sangam poetry and the epics and the life
Mhm.
of the Tamil saints. And they're all quite
Okay.
poetic. They have popularized all these songs. So right from the young age, I've been exposed to this kind of poetry and all that. But initially, in the initial years, it stayed as poetry. One
Mm.
can appreciate the rhyme and so on. But later on, you also start appreciating the content of this poetry, and that is where
Mm.
I felt that the Bhakti poetry is not just about devotion. It is not just praising a particular deity, but it is also a
Mm.
lot about social change. It is a
Mhm.
reflection on those times. This happened about
Mm.
14 centuries back, and
Yeah.
you can imagine the society there. Even today, you have so much of caste tensions and inequality, and you
Mm.
know oppression of women and so on. 14 centuries
Mhm.
back, you can imagine how much more it would have been, how much society would have been divided. And in those times, to raise a voice against caste inequities and against
mm,
the, the patriarchal mindset or the patriarchal framework of society. It requires a lot of guts. It requires a lot of imagination, creativity, and so on to actually attract millions of people, because this poetry
mm.
is just, if you can see that this poetry lives even after 14 centuries, then you can imagine that at that time it would have been so popular and people would
Yeah.
have been followed that. So
Mm,
that is the reason why I thought that while there are a lot of books on this Bhakti poetry, there are a lot of books, but
mm.
uh, more on the devotional aspects and
Yeah.
interpreting. There are many commentaries on the poetry. So I wanted to take
Mm,
a different kind of approach, and rather
mm,
than comment on the verses or try to translate them,
mm,
not all of them have been translated, but quite a considerable portion has been translated by very good translators. So
mm,
I borrow a lot of existing translations. A few I did myself, but
mm,
I what I added in this book was the the reforms that the Bhakti saints talked about, and the
mm,
changes that they brought about in society, which even today there is a reflection.
mm,
Even today, when people recall
mm,
certain verses of the Bhakti saints, they talk about, it is about power, about caste discrimination. You know, it is a kind of a very evocative poetry that we have today, and which can be
mm,
used. So I thought it is very relevant to today, even after
mm.
14 centuries. So that is the reason
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
I put
Okay. Okay.
that.
And how much time did you take to complete the book, like cover to cover, and like how challenging was it, basically?
It was quite challenging because
Mm,
one, uh, it's a huge amount of corpus. So
mm,
there were this 12 alvars who are the Vaishnavites, and 63
mhm,
Nayanars who are the Saivites. And between them, they
mm,
had written thousands and thousands of lines, verses,
mm,
and combination of verses called pasurams
mm,
and padigams and pasurams. And they're all arranged in, mostly, there are several arrangements
mm.
that are possible, but they're arranged in a group of 10 lines, and
Okay.
then again 10 uh, sets of those 10 liners. So
Okay.
uh, it is a kind of a complete
It's
100 verses in one
huge.
thing.
Yeah.
So
Mm,
one has to absorb, grasp the inner meaning of those things. So that
mm,
took me quite some time. Uh,
mm,
I had some familiarity with this poetry, but serious
mm.
research I started, I would say, about 2 years back, and
Okay.
I gathered whatever uh, commentaries existed on this poetry and tried to select
Mm,
what can be those best this thing. So it is a selective poetry. I'm not giving that entire
mm,
poetry,
mm,
because poetry was about deities and about temples and about uh, life. So I had to be selective and choose what I would
yeah.
like to talk about, I
Mm,
would like to promote. So that took some
mm,
time, and Penguin was kind enough to, they liked the idea when I presented the
mm,
concept more
mm,
than a year back, and they then
mm.
immediately said that they are for it, and so I started
Okay.
working on the drafts. So it does take, when research takes about 1 year, and the process of publishing takes about another year at least,
Mm,
provided that you already have some idea of the subject. It is
mm,
not some
mm,
uh,
mm.
research from scratch.
So, so it took you 2 years.
Yes, minimum. Right.
Okay. Mm. So, see, many people think of bhakti as like an inner thing, है ना? Something that you go inside you and do. It's a very personal equation with the deity. So, what gets lost when we ignore its social edge? Because, like you said, there are that Bhakti movement brought in social changes also. It challenged the existing authority also. So, does it uh, does Bhakti lose its essence in the process?
Yeah, see, that happens to all religions because
Mm,
one is religion serves as uh, pers- as a tool for personal emancipation and personal spirituality. At the same time,
mm,
a commentary on
mm,
the system and the times in which
mm,
that religion was founded talks about the social
mm,
problems at that particular point in time. So it is both ways,
mm,
and I have concentrated more on the social aspects. But there is a personal
mm,
thing, and that is what I said that most people would have written
mm,
about the personal aspects. And even today,
mm,
when people recite these bhakti hymns, either in the temple or at home, you know, so they look at it as a personal, as something which gives them peace, some uh,
mm.
path to emancipation, and so on. So
Yeah.
the
Mm,
messages of bhakti that um, um, you have to be devoted to one God, and you believe,
mm,
you have complete trust, you surrender yourself, and
mm,
you are a part of that creator. So these
mm.
messages of bhakti produce some
Mm,
kind of an equation with God, a personal equation with God, which is
yeah.
different
Mm,
from the earlier ones, like the Vedic
mm,
equation, where you needed an
mm,
interpreter, a priest, to interpret between the God and the devotee. Because devotees normally could not so easily understand the Vedic scriptures because they were in Sanskrit and they were
mm,
written. The Sanskrit is the language of the elite, and
mm,
it was not written. And that is the reason why Buddhism and Jainism, Buddha wrote a script in which ordinary people could understand. So
we could
these are
understand.
some
Yeah.
aspects, and that is exactly what the Tamil Bhakti saints followed. They wrote
Mm,
their verses
mm,
in Tamil where people could
mm,
relate to, and they didn't need an interpreter to understand those Tamil
mm,
verses. They didn't need an interpreter to approach God. So each one
mm,
approached in a different way. So that is one aspect
mm,
of devotion. I have brought, I have tried to say quite a bit about that aspect of devotion, where a devotee
mm,
thinks of God as a friend, as a lover, as
mm,
a child, as a groom. So different ways of looking at the deity. That is one aspect where
mm,
you have personal
mm,
equation. But the other aspect
mm,
is that in this whole process, you bring people together, and you remove those
mm,
inequalities, at least in devotion. That
mm.
you don't need to be an
True.
elite to enter a temple
Mm,
or to recite a verse. You
mm,
can understand. You can
mm,
do it on your own. And the
mm,
whole temple worship, though it has become
mm,
very complicated today, uh, the way the temple worship started and
mm,
during the Bhakti movement was a very simple kind of worship. The temple was just a
mm,
a single stone enclosure, and so anybody can
mm,
enter. There was no priest to, interpret or stand between the devotee and the god. Today you have
mm,
it has become much more evolved. Temples are huge structures. They have
mm,
a huge area, and there are priests to regulate the devotees, and even they charge you to um,
mm,
go and pray to God. And the
mm,
person
mm,
who pays more can have greater access or a faster access.
mm,
So that didn't
mm,
exist in those days,
mm,
and it made
mm,
worship easy, and
mm,
that spiritual um, gratification, the spirituality that one needed could be obtained
mm,
at a very simple cost. All you need to do is take some leaves and flowers and leave it in the temple, and that's it. It gives you that satisfaction. So that aspect of spirituality, see, the reason is that all this did not happen just because somebody thought about it. It happened because of the necessity in the development of society at that point in time. At that point in time, when we are talking about 14 centuries back, and when empires were coming into being, the Pallava Empire was growing, and
mm,
trade was increasing. Increasingly, world trade was increasing. So therefore, they
mm,
needed to produce more things, and many people were getting uprooted from the village to the cities, and
mm,
the cities had quarters for workmen like carpenters, oil merchants, and so on. So the
mm,
cities were flourishing at that time, and those who came to the cities were sort of lost in that maze of economic activity. You know,
mm,
they no longer had that support of their kins at home,
mm,
have their old gods, uh, the village gods. So they come into the city and they find that, where do they go for their spiritual satisfaction? So the Bhakti saints catered to that. They knew that these are all ordinary people and they can understand only ordinary their mother tongue. So they started singing to them, and poetry and singing, poetry accompanied with music and dance and singing is a very, you know irresistible force.
combination.
Together so many people, and
Yeah.
so they liked it, and that is the way
Mm,
Bhakti movement evolved in other parts also. It is always
yeah.
poetry along with dance, music, forgetting
Ah,
oneself, and a
mm,
passionate kind of
mm.
expression.
Like, hmm. You said that temples in those times were very simple structures, maybe a small stone structure. So, don't you think that people moving to the city, this economic activity which started happening, and the need for people moving from villages to cities, in the cities they were lost. So, there was a need to construct maybe bigger temples, or uh, maybe just to preserve their own, because there was so much of influx of other people also. So they wanted to maintain their own identity. So they started like making temples in a more grand way.
Yes, that is. I see. I, it is not that temples came in only at that time. Temples would have
Mm,
existed even before that. But what
mm,
happened was that the earlier temples were built with mud and wood, and they were mud structures or wooden structures.
mm,
You know,
mm,
so they are no longer there. So we don't know when,
mm,
what kind of temple worship was that before. We can imagine that they were all small structures. Okay, until a
mm,
time came
mm.
when they had tools to carve a single monolithic stone and make a temple out
Yeah.
of it, and that was
Mm,
done in 14th centuries back by a Pallava king.
mm,
First time he he was succeeded in building a stone temple out of a single stone. After that,
mm,
they started building self-standing stone structures, which exist even today.
mm,
So
mm,
we don't know when temple worship started, but when it started on a very small scale, very
mm,
this thing, very simple kind of thing. So
mm,
um, that is the way that temples acted in in that
mm,
the period, and
mm,
they served. Before that, what happened was that the the period before the temples was a period of rituals and sacrifices, which even today
mm,
it is there. Temples could have existed earlier, but the stone temples
mm,
came in around the time of the Bhakti saints, and they made it
mm,
popular and made temple
mm,
a general place of congregation where people can
mm,
come, sing, dance, recite
mm,
their poetry in Tamil. So that was a
mm,
meeting place for the saints and the followers, because when you read the verses of saints, you find mention of
mm,
hundreds of temples all across Tamil Nadu, and they all exist. They were real
mm,
temples. And at that point in
mm,
time, there would have been very modest, small temples.
mm,
Now, many of them have grown into very huge temples. Now,
mm,
why temples attracted people is that one,
mm,
it's an open space where you can go and meet the deity, and then you can enter without any permission. You can no
mm,
need for an intermediate, and you can
mm,
take small gifts to the deity like leaves and flowers, which are affordable to everyone.
mm,
Whereas
mm,
on the other hand, a costlier version of worship was
mm,
the Vedic Orthodox version of worship. Which
mm,
when I say Vedic Orthodox, it is not related to the Vedas as such because they didn't talk about this thing, but the
mm,
rituals and sacrifices that were introduced by the
mm,
Vedic Orthodoxy belonged
mm,
to, it required a Brahmin priest, it required a lot of
mm,
knowledge of Sanskrit, and even
mm,
setting out the ritual, the ground for the ritual, and you know,
mm,
making sure that the planets are in alignment and the time is
mm,
right, place is right. All this could be done only by very well-to-do people like kings and wealthy merchants. It was not
mm,
within the um, grasp or affordability of ordinary people. They could not hire a priest,
mm,
for example, and do a yagna or a public sacrifice and all that. So there are various sacrifices that which we would have heard and elaborate things are there. In the same way, uh, in the Bhakti Saints set up uh, quite some elaborate ways of temple worship, which later on
mm,
evolved in temple construction
mm,
and temple
mm,
architecture called the agamas, and
mm,
the agamas specified many things like the temple orientation, the way it is built and its structure and you know and all that. But before this, even these agamas came in the 14th century, the temples were very small structures people could have access
mm,
to. They could, ordinary people could even set up a temple. So that is how it became popular, and that is why today in Tamil Nadu you have thousands of temples still around
mm,
that region. It has
mm,
become a
mm.
part
So,
of the Tamil culture.
like you said that ordinary people could enter. So, where did this caste thing come about? Like the lower castes will not be allowed to, they were not allowed to enter temples back
Yeah.
then. So, how did
So
this thing, this is also something made by the priests or the Brahmins? How did this thing come about?
so this was already existing because the uh, around the Sangam period and towards the end of the Sangam period, there were a lot of migration of Brahmins from the north who brought in Vedic
Okay.
structures, orthodoxy, the Vedic rituals, the Vedic script, the language, Sanskrit. So slowly it pervaded into Tamil society. And you can see
Mm,
even in the epics written uh, in the first millennium, 20 centuries back, where reflected
mm,
this, the North Indian gods, the North Indian Puranas, and rituals, sacrifices, and so on. So it was already prevalent, and the caste structure was getting very formalized slowly.
mm,
And
mm,
there are two aspects. One is that formal, the four varnas which are defined,
mm,
and then
mm,
within Tamilian society, you also have the concept of jati, which is to do with the
mm,
occupation of a particular person. So
mm,
the varnas are very prefixed and rigid, whereas the jatis are
mm,
flexible. One can go up or down the ladder depending on one's
mm,
occupation as a carpenter or a stonemason, and so on.
mm,
And they are very related
mm,
to professions. So these
mm,
two existed side by side, and that is the reason why by the time we come to the period of the Bhakti saints in the 6th century, they were already
mm,
talking about against untouchability and against
ah,
discrimination. And
mm,
some of the saints came from the outcasts. Like
mm,
Nandanar is one saint who was a tanner,
mm,
was employed in the tanning industry, and the leather workers are kept outside the city. They have to live in uh, or outside the village. They're generally considered as outcasts and polluted. and because they work with the skin, with the hide and
Mm,
cow and all that. But they also supply
mm,
some things to the temples, you
mm,
know, oil and the fat and some things like that. So anyway, they were not allowed to enter into temples, and that was the whole story of Raghavan, who thought of
mm,
entering a temple, was never allowed to, and finally could enter a temple only when he walked over fire. And then there
mm,
was another Alvar called Tirupan Alvar, who was a flutist.
mm,
You know,
mm,
uh, in those days, the bards and the singers, the street singers were again considered lower caste, and he belonged
mm,
to the caste of bards. And they again, he was not allowed entry into the temple, and he used to sing from across the river in Trichy. You would have heard of the Srirangam temple. So he would
uh-huh,
sing. He is not allowed even to cross the river, and that is the story
mm,
of this thing. So these are all things which tell us that what kind of society was there, the kind of
yeah,
discrimination, and then how
mm,
radical message was given by the Bhakti movement in
Bhakti.
accepting an outcast, a hunter,
Mm,
and a bard as their equal. After that,
mm,
many of the Brahmin saints also sang praises about this
mm,
so-called
mm,
outcasts. And today, when you go to
yeah,
temples, all these
mm,
63 Nayanars and 12 Alvars, irrespective of caste
mm,
and sex, they are equal.
mm,
Their statues are kept outside the temple
mm,
in the periphery, in the area outside, and uh, they are worshipped as much after the main deity. They are also worshipped even today.
mm,
So they are considered as equal, and nobody is.
mm,
While we say that somebody writes better poetry and someone is, very
mm,
their rhyme is better than another poet among the Bhakti saints,
mm,
they are all considered equal. Some of them did not even write poetry; they only were
mm.
royal Shaivites or
Okay.
Shiva. So not all of them wrote poetry, but they were very
Mm,
devoted. They were in the movement. They contributed to the movement.
mm,
So that is the reason why
mm,
all of them are treated equal, and you will hardly find
mm,
any thing which is so many centuries old, giving equal
mm,
prominence to uh, different sects, people coming from
mm,
different sectors of society. So that is
mm,
a bit.
mm.
So the stories are very, very, very interesting to read, and I can
Mm.
say a lot about many stories, but we don't have time for
Yeah,
that. So the basic
yeah.
idea is that you know there was this already entrenched view of caste, but the Bhakti saints
Uh,
struggled and fought
broke
against it.
that,
Yeah.
broke that.
Broke that,
Today, when we see,
not fully, because even today you are having the castes and
yeah,
when at least they
yeah,
raise their voice, and to one level their thought reflects even today. Even today, when
uh,
people talk against caste, they quote from this Bhakti saints.
uh,
So
uh.
their
No, but
movies are
the Bhakti Tamil Bhakti movement was the harbinger, in a sense, of bringing people, all the people together. Like today, if all castes and go into a temple, that is, one has to thank them. It
exactly.
took a long time, but then they started it.
They started it, and that prevailed
Mm,
even till today. While today,
mm,
you can see some kind of a retracing back, going back in time, going
mm,
back in history, when some temples are
mm,
taking a stand that I will not allow these people and that
mm,
person to enter. So it is a
mm,
regressive step, whereas the Bhakti saints
mm.
fought for everyone to come,
Yeah,
irrespective of who they are. So
yeah.
these are all. That is why it is valid. The messages are valid even
Mm,
today.
yeah, true. Mm. So, how did like women saints? Andal is one which is known, at least to me, and many people in North, they do know about her. So, how did women saints like Andal challenge the religious and social boundaries? What did you find in your research? How exactly? Let's talk about her.
Yeah. So they had a tough time in any way, because
Mm,
you can imagine that somebody going out and becoming a full-fledged worship, full-fledged saint, even today
mm,
among the women, is not considered. There's a lot of opposition from the family and so on. And
okay.
a woman's role is considered a role in the household, in
Mm,
raising children, and so
mm,
on.
mm,
So they must have felt the pressure even more, and but they
mm,
stood up against it, and the Bhakti movement supported them. They considered them as
mm,
part of their movement, and
mm,
accepted their messages, accepted them as they are, and brought them into the fold of saints, and allowed them
mm.
to write poetry, express themselves in the way they want. And in that way, the two outstanding female saints stand out. One is Andal, the other one is Karaikal Ammayar. Karaikal is a
Okay.
place from where she came, and Ammayar is a,
Okay.
respectable word for a lady. So
Okay.
she is called respected lady. And
Mm,
so both of them took different paths. Andal was a
mm,
beautiful woman who um, did not succumb to the pressure of getting married and bearing children and being confined to the household. She became a devotee right from her early stage. She was an orphan, brought
mm,
brought up by another saint, and
mm.
so when she grew up, she then said that I'm not going to settle into a traditional kind of marriage. I can only get married to the God Himself and nobody else. So it was a very kind of revolutionary statement that she made.
Mm,
And, uh,
mm.
and the story says, of course, there is a lot of myth mixed in stories. The story says that
Okay.
finally she could make that happen by actually
Mm,
uh, the god appeared in her father's dream and said that you bring her to my temple. She is my bride. I accept it. And so she
okay.
is taken to the temple and merged with God. And even today, the Andal is considered as one, as a consort of Vishnu. Okay, so that is one
Okay.
story that goes.
Do you have a temple in her name anywhere?
No, she is a part of. She is worshipped as a part of that Vishnu. She is present
Mm,
in all Vishnu temples or most Vishnu temples as
okay.
one of the most loyal devotees. Of,
Okay.
so, uh, so there's I've not heard of a separate temple for Andal, but she's a very
Mm,
she's considered a saint, a woman saint, and her Pasurams and verses are sung even today
mm,
in the month of December in
mm.
many families and many households who recite our entire poetry. You know, so it
Okay.
is very popular poetry on yours.
Mm,
Karakal Amayar, on the other hand, took a different path. She was a very she was again a beautiful, well uh, well-to-do from a very well-to-do family of a rich merchant.
mm,
And,
mm,
he became a devotee of Shiva, you know,
mm,
and then she started doing some miracles, which sort of
mm.
terrified her husband. And he said that
Okay.
you cannot be an ordinary person. You must be a ghoul or you must be a demon. So I cannot have a married life with you. And so he
Okay.
chucked her out. But she said that no,
Mm,
I don't care. I want to be a devotee and I don't want this wealth or this married life. So
mm,
she took the other path that while Andal maintained, said that if I am beautiful, I will stay beautiful. There's nothing wrong with it. What
mm.
is it? Whereas the Karakal Amayar said that it is my beauty which is coming in the way of me being a saint and being considered as a
Okay.
woman. So let me lose my beauty, and she prayed and became an old woman, a woman with wrinkles, and you know. So what she did was that she went away from society and lived in cemeteries where she was also supposed to be. reside. So she was
Okay.
generally believed to live among among corpses and demons.
Mm.
So she became a part
Mm.
of that entourage, and she's supposed to have witnessed Shiva's dance, that very well-known cosmic dance. She's supposed to have witnessed
Mm.
that. So that is a part of her story, right? That she
Okay.
sacrificed herself. She didn't care about being, continuing to be a traditional woman. So
Mm.
she just did what she had in mind and became one of the
Mm.
most respected. And she wrote her poetry, and her poetry is very different from Andal's. Andal's poetry is
Mm.
very gentle, and Karekal Amaya's poetry is very, very sort of what you can
It's love for God, no?
produces fear, produces. So it is a very intense kind of emotion that is that
Mm.
because it reflects the life that she had gone through.
Mm.
So these are
Mm.
two opposite personalities,
Mm.
saying that as a woman I can still be a saint, but it also reflects that in that society as of today, they had to change themselves to become that. They cannot live
Mm.
in the traditional. They could not be a housewife and be a saint. It was not. They were
Mm.
incompatible. So they had to change
Mm.
themselves. They had to leave their this thing. So that is one way of looking at it. So
Mm.
and so these
But
are all things where they struggle against existing inequalities and existing evils in society. They could come to a particular point, but they could not totally eradicate the thing because it was
mm.
too much,
Mm. But
centuries
that's
back.
true of men also, and in not back then, but today's time also. You can't be a household.
Yeah,
At least we don't have examples, many examples where you can be a householder and a devotee.
correct,
Like you
correct.
can do normal ritual, you can do bhakti, but you cannot like totally be that
Yeah, but they can
without.
they can live. They can continue to live without
Uh,
changing themselves. They just
uh,
think. That is the difference between in Buddhism and Jainism. You have to become an ascetic,
hmm,
become a saint.
hmm,
You have to live in the sangha.
hmm,
You have to
hmm,
leave your family altogether. Whereas in Bhakti saints, you
hmm,
don't have to leave. Many of them stayed
hmm.
with their family. So,
No, but then
but
Buddha always advocated the middle path. He said you pray to Lord and then come fulfill your duties also, the worldly duties.
yeah, but that was not for saints. That was for the followers, the ordinary followers. The ordinary
Normally, people,
followers, he
normal
said
people.
that you can live your life. You can just believe because
Hmm,
everybody cannot be expected to leave everything and come and become
hmm,
a bhikshu. But for bhikshus,
hmm.
they cannot have a relationship with their families. They have to live from day
Families.
to day.
Hmm,
They cannot gather property. So that
hmm,
they have to live in a sangha, in a communal
hmm.
thing.
True.
Whereas in the Bhakti saints, they didn't have that kind of a community. They didn't have an
Hmm,
institution. So when you
hmm,
say Alvar and Nayanar, the Shaivite and Vaishnavite saints, they didn't have a building
hmm,
where they lived or
hmm.
institution where they made.
True.
It is just the temples were their home.
Ah,
And, there were no great restrictions on how they moved around
yeah.
and what they ate and all that.
Hmm,
That was
hmm,
not a
hmm.
restriction.
True. True. So, how did Tamil Bhakti movement? You've written that it impacted. It traveled across North. How did it travel across North, and like what connects the Tamil saints to the Northern saints like Kabir and Mirabai? Because I somehow feel Mirabai and Andal, they are
Very
maybe
similar.
one soul, two bodies, two different times.
Correct, correct.
So, how did Tamil movement travel to North?
Yeah, see, even the Bhakti saints, they lived between the 6th and 9th century, but
Hmm.
their verses were collected and made into a corpus and canonized, became a proper song sung in temples only around
Hmm.
from the 10th to 12th century. 10th century, they were the verses were collected 12th century. The stories were written. The hagiography of the
Okay.
Bhakti song was made available. And
Okay. Okay.
around that same time in the 12th century in Karnataka, the
Hmm.
Veerashaiva movement started, and that became a big movement. And Basavanna and Bhakti saints like that, they had they popularized Bhakti with about the same
Hmm.
messages, and
Hmm.
except that they said that even a temple worship is not required. You are yourself a temple. So
Hmm.
as long as you believe in one God and don't believe in discrimination and this thing that everyone is equal before God,
Hmm.
that is fine. You know, that is the way you worship. That is your worship. So that movement started in Karnataka and later on went to Maharashtra. Uh,
Hmm.
you know, into in the form also evolved. You know, here also the Basavanna wrote poetry, and in Maharashtra also the Abhangas became popular, and so these are all some things which slowly from Tamil Nadu it spread to Karnataka and Maharashtra. That is the way I see, and later on to the north, like Meera came, I think around the 15th century, 14th, 15th. Later on Kabir and Tulsi. Simultaneously, it spread to the east also, to Orissa and Assam. So Jayadev and others were very popular poets. And later on, during the Mughal period, the Sufi movement came into being. So these are all one after another. They spread to different parts, but the messages were same. The form was quite similar. They all used poetry, dance, and music. Some of them were promoted a particular god, some of them promoted a formless god, and some of them promoted temple worship, some of them did not promote temple worship. But the underlying messages were same. They
Hmm.
were all equal, they encouraged women to join the movement, and
Hmm.
all castes came into them.
Hmm. And it all started from down south, Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, from all the written material, it started from the 6th
Hmm.
century, you know,
Hmm.
and this Karekal Amayar was among the first of the saints. She was born towards
Hmm.
the end of the 5th century.
Hmm.
So the the chronology supports that fact that this
Hmm.
entire corpus is also there as proof that this is what they stood for, and the stories
Yeah.
are there and all verified because the temples
Hmm.
existed, the corpus exists, you know,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
all that. So historically, there is it has been because there is a mention of certain things in that poetry, which has been also
Hmm.
verified that they were they lived in that particular period. So their histories have
Hmm.
been reconstructed, and their birthplaces and birth time, the
Hmm.
dates have been more or less now fixed. So
Hmm. Hmm. Why do you think that there is so much interest in history? People are taking so much interest in history. Like you've also gone back to 6th century and brought all that here in today, 21st century. There are many people who are writing about history. There are many people who are writing about temples specifically. The whole Bharatiya Virasat or the Sanatan culture. Why is that happening in like today?
yeah, see, one is a political agenda can be there to rewrite history. But
Mm,
as a historian, and
mm,
it is like a science, it is no less a science than
mm,
any other science. So when you
mm,
state a particular historical opinion, or when you state a particular observation in history, you have to support it
mm,
with evidence, and also look at what other historians have said earlier, and if you differ
mm,
from them, you have to state your argument and prove that why you are different, right?
mm,
So, but just making statements and based on mythology and unverified facts is not going to
mm,
help anyone, or rewriting
mm,
history that way cannot be. It is not that history is
mm,
always fixed. One can, every society looks at history from their angle, from where they stand. They interpret history.
mm,
So that is
mm,
perfectly fine because you cannot live in 14th century or 6th century and then imagine what
mm,
it would have been. Of course, you accept the faults of people who lived in 6th century. You know their limitations. But
mm,
you look at it from today's point of view, what is there for me to benefit? You know,
mm,
what are the lessons I can learn from history? And that is
mm,
always there. Every society looks back at history and tries to learn because didn't drop from the sky. We dropped from the past. You know, so as
mm,
it evolves, as you understand your history better, you are also a better
mm,
person, and you understand
mm,
the culture of your people, their language,
mm,
the way they came, and all
mm,
that. Because things suddenly don't change. And today, if you think of history and philosophy, it is ingrained in our mind. You know? We have all
mm,
heard about um, the Vedas and about the Mauryan Empire and about the Mughal Empire and so on. So that cannot be erased. That happened. And
mm,
philosophically also, you from when you are a child, you are taught about dharma and karma and your sins of the past and how you should live your life in this life. So these are all some things which we follow, which
mm,
unconsciously it is in our mind. So
mm,
you cannot change it. You cannot suddenly say that like all these things existed. The Varna system existed. There was discrimination, and that is why
mm,
all these saints came, all these movements came in history. So we'll have to look at
mm,
the objective part of that and accept that this is what happened and not prettify history. The history is
mm,
not just to prettify that we were great all the time.
mm,
No society is like that. Societies go through ups and downs. At one time they are great, at another time they fall down. So
mm,
that's how we learn. We learn from history.
mm. So, history means it's basically to learn.
Yeah.
You go back to history to learn where you come from and how you can improve from now, how you
Yeah.
can become better.
And without
So, how
history,
did,
you don't have your roots. You are
yeah.
not an Indian. When you say you are an Indian, you have a history.
Mm,
So
mm. So, how did writing this whole book impact you personally?
it was, I think, very nice to see that you know there were such moments, and that history can play a role even today. And earlier, when like I said, first I knew about these poems. I've read them in my school.
Mm,
I've
mm,
written in my exams and so on by rote. But at that time I thought these are just poems. But later on I understood the social significance of these poems, the historical
mm,
significance of the rise of these
mm,
Bhakti poems. So I find it very gratifying that I'm able to bring that out as a book and
mm,
so far the reception for the book has been extremely good, and I
mm.
got very positive reviews about the book,
Okay.
saying that
Okay.
this is a very new angle and there's a lot to
Mm,
learn from this book, and some new ideas have been proposed in this book, and also
mm,
reinstating or repopularizing the
mm,
lives and the works of the Bhakti saints is again liked by many people, and
mm,
they can now understand the social significance of this
mm.
development. So in that way, I am very happy that I took up this subject and
Okay.
did a job of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, today, what you can say about bhakti? Where does bhakti live? It is in a temple, it is in a street, it is in home, or it is in a person.
So, yeah, it is a way of the way that a person thinks. Like there are some people who are very concerned about where our society is going. They are concerned about
Hmm.
today's problems, about the environment, about sustainability, about wars. about peace, about living
mm,
a peaceful life, about equality. So for such people, bhakti becomes something where you believe that all are equal. You look at the
mm,
world in a humane way, that everyone, has to be protected, and nobody can be uh, nobody can be expensed for the safety of somebody else.
mm,
So that is why when wars happen, then there is
mm,
always the justification that uh, it is to protect my country, my nation. So Bhakti gives you that perspective that everyone is equal, that you have to look
mm,
at human beings as human beings, they're all gods. And so, what is the point in worshipping a god in a temple when
mm,
the god who is your neighbor, you're not willing to accept them as equal?
mm,
So,
mm,
these are the questions that Bhakti throws up. At the same time, it
mm,
is a route for person satisfaction, which is up to their conscience. People recite the poems, go to temples, sit in their homes and recite these verses to
mm,
attain salvation, to have peace of mind. You know, so that is the way bhakti is looked at by some,
mm,
which is fine. It is the
mm,
prerogative.
mm.
It serves
So to
that
each his own.
to each his own. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Okay, okay. So as we come to towards the end of this conversation, I want to ask you, you are a historian, and a person of repute, an author of repute. What you would advise an upcoming author, particularly a person who wants to write about history, what would you advise him or her?
I would advise that be objective, do a lot of research, don't come
Hmm,
to predetermined conclusions. You have to
hmm,
read through what others say first, understand their things, and then if you differ
hmm,
from them, you need to have very strong arguments why you are differing. So you
hmm,
cannot just come with a predetermined notion that this is what is history, or against a particular caste or a religion, or against a particular era or an epoch. So you cannot come with predetermined notions, and whatever you say has to be established. Like history, a historian always looks at written material. He looks at inscriptions. He looks at coins, whether they give some kind of stories. He looks at archaeological proof of various things, and now they do other advanced methods of research, also to prove or to study eating habits or the occupational habits of human beings, or their migration habits, or where they came from and all. So these are all establishing many things and proving scientifically that something happened. So
hmm,
the debate that you often have are all, you have to look at it very objectively, and see whether, like for example, Bhakti movement itself, there is a there are some who claim that it is the Bhakti movement which consolidated Hinduism as far back as the 6th century. Okay, but
okay.
if you look at, I don't look at it that way as one religion, because right from beginning, Indian thought has
Hmm,
many schools of thought are available for Indians.
hmm,
You can follow a
hmm,
yoga, uh, or you can follow the Advaita Marga, or the
hmm,
Dvaita Marga,
hmm,
or the Bhakti Marga. So it is left to
hmm,
you. And philosophically, you can believe in many systems. You can be a Buddhist or a
hmm,
Jain, something. You can believe in a creator, you need not believe in a creator. So these are all some options which Indian schools of thought gave to people, and they have
hmm,
stayed like that. So even during the Bhakti time, there is Vaishnava thought and Shaivite, and then Buddhists and Jains also existed at that time. So there was a
hmm,
debate among all of them on what is the right way
hmm,
to do that.
hmm,
So it is a kind of a society where we should not impose restrictions and club people into one kind of one
Mm,
group or one people having the same ideas. They don't have the same vision or the same ideas. They believe in different
mm,
ways of attaining
mm,
salvation or attaining peace, spirituality. So it is their business. So why make it
mm,
a question of debate? So,
mm.
so that is my uh, thought
So
of
history, like you mean history like science is fact based. You cannot move away from facts.
yes, yes. You have
Huh?
to prove it, and
Mm,
it has to be accepted by what you call a group of historians. Till
mm,
then, it doesn't become fact. Even if one historian finds something, that doesn't mean that that is history. It
mm.
has to be accepted by
Yeah.
the
Uh,
academic
mm.
circles.
Like you have to
Like
do
science,
proper
physics.
research
Yeah,
and read, maybe read and read and read
that's true.
as much as you
Be,
can to come to
be
one
open to
conclusion.
be open to
Mm,
suggestion. Don't come
mm,
to predetermined conclusions. Be
mm, mm,
tolerant to
mm.
other points of
Mm.
view, and then try
Yeah.
to arrive at an objective scientific position
Mm,
yourself by investigating properly. Don't believe anyone. You just go to the root, go to the source of that
mm,
material, and try to study
mm.
what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And in this book, was there any particular chapter that was the most tough to write or challenging to write?
Um, yes, there were some things I wanted to write a lot about the
Mm.
philosophy of the Bhakti movement, but
Okay.
um, that is not very well documented, like as in the Upanishads or as in Buddhism and Jainism. It is not very well
Okay.
documented here. Their worldview or how one attains salvation or and so on. So I had
Mm.
to sort of read and try to find sources of material. Otherwise, because their
Okay.
stories exist, their inscriptions exist, their poetry exists, and one more thing is that it is written in old Tamil, so I required to read commentaries in Tamil,
Mm.
in simpler Tamil, to understand that old
Mm.
Tamil. Because it is not so
Okay.
easy to understand in today's.
Okay. 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 And what are you busy right now? Are you writing any other book? Are you working on any other book?
Yeah, I'm working on a book for Hachette. I had earlier
Okay.
done a book on Indian cities for them.
Okay.
Indian cities, ancient and medieval, which was
Okay.
meant for a age group of 15 plus. So
Okay.
now Hachette approached me and said that can you do it for children in the age group of 8 to 13? So I'm now trying to
Okay.
convert it to rewrite as a children's book of Indian cities
Uh,
and
hmm.
bringing them, explaining about the ancient history of Indian
Hmm.
cities, some of which have existed for more than 2000 years, like Patna and all that. So
Hmm.
that is one project I have taken up now.
Okay. But
Hopefully, it
is
will.
it writing for children very different from writing for an adult reader?
Very different. It has to be simple
Hmm.
language, lot of visuals,
Hmm.
stories. It
Hmm.
has to be storytelling. So
Hmm.
that is one, one always has to start and then learn.
Hmm.
Uh,
Hmm.
so I'm quite excited by that. That something that children can read is very important.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I was just
Yeah.
imagining with that Bhakti moment, I were to write for
Hmm.
children. How will I write? How
Okay.
will I make them understand? So that is.
Okay. That means eventually there will be a book for children on Bhakti moments.
I hope so.
Okay. 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 Thank you so much, Mr. Raghavan, and for this conversation and for reminding me that poetry is not just something that we read, it is something that can help people go inwards and move forward. Thank you so much. And thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for writing that book. What I liked, best about the book was it was not a boring history book. It
Yeah,
was an
that is
interesting reading. So
that
thank you
is
so
nice
much
to
for
hear.
that.
Yes, yes. That is nice
Yeah.
to hear.
And I wish you all the best with your next book and all your future books. Maybe we'll
Okay,
come back again when you write a book, when your children book is complete.
that's true. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
And thank you for the time
Thank you
that
so
you've given.
much.
And a very
Yeah,
interesting
thank you. It's my
conversation.
pleasure. Yeah,
Thank you.
my pleasure, sir. Thank you.